Hear from Rich from what's going on at.
Here's the most exciting part of the program: metadata and workflow. How many people are really, interested in hearing about this? Actually, I'm really excited to talk about it because the previous speakers have really, I think, made a good point of how important this is in terms of the functionality of the content as well as the discovery of the content. So I'm just basically going to go through a few slides that kind of indicate what the importance is and maybe some efficient ways of generating some really good metadata.
Okay.
So I work for Scopie Knowledge Center. We're a global knowledge services provider, which means we have about 1,100 subject matter experts based in 3 locations in Chennai, India. And those subject matter experts approach content and enrich content from the perspective of a user. So engineers, scientists, medical experts, legal, business professionals that are taking automation that we've developed over the years and curating the output of that automation to provide a real scalable deliverable that's contextually accurate for the discipline. So that could be an abstract, keywords, taxonomy, controlled vocabulary, any kind of metadata enrichment, deep indexing where we're really getting into the nitty-gritty of scientific and technical content and tagging that at a very deep level. So on the next slide, we'll take a quick look at metadata, right? So metadata for a lot of us has always been looked at kind of in a schema like this. So in other words, the core information or data about a specific document or a specific file that identifies it and makes it retrievable, right? I mean, I know that's a simplistic description, but that's basically how a lot of people have looked at it. And then that data is sent out to various channels so we can sell our content so people can discover it. So, but there's another way of looking at metadata because there's a lot of different types of metadata, and almost anything can be metadata. We tend to look at it at Scope as a value chain of metadata. So you have basic bibliographic metadata, similar to what was on the last slide, but then there's also descriptive metadata. And that's the categories that abstracts and keywords would apply to, and applications of taxonomies and tagging content about describing its aboutness, so to speak, right? And then there's semantic metadata. I don't want to really get into that. I don't know if anybody else here wants to get into it, but that's another level altogether, and that's another session. So really, that descriptive metadata, when you look at it as a value chain, the more of it and the more sophisticated it gets, it's increasing the value of the user experience and making content more discoverable. So just to take a little bit of a broader overview of descriptive metadata, it really is what's driving discoverability, right? So it can be applied across a corpus of content. It's not just at the document level, but it's across a corpus of content. It helps facilitate new business models of similar content when you're storing your content in a content management system per se, and it's tagged, that content that's tagged appropriately according to specific terminology, keywords, that can be surfaced into a new product that can be useful and sold. So it's really the foundation for enriching content, whether it be book content or any other kind of content. I think good descriptive metadata is really a foundation for a discovery strategy, which is what a lot of book publishers are kind of dealing with these days. And so we'll go to the next slide. And then, of course, there's been information, that really supports the value of this descriptive metadata, right? So, the NISO's Open Discovery Initiative clearly recommends that publishers send descriptive metadata like keywords and abstracts to discovery service providers to make their content more discoverable. Likewise, there was a recent study by Nielsen about the importance of metadata in discoverability for books, and it's clearly found that the more descriptive metadata, the more descriptive elements that you provide to these different search engines and discovery services, the higher the sale of the book. So there's a really direct correlation between the quality and the quantity of descriptive metadata and selling the book. So this is all good. Just here, again, EBSCO clearly states that things like abstracts and keywords definitely affect the relevancy ranking and the precision of search of content, which is what a lot of researchers are looking for, not only to find the content, but finding the right content. So a lot of people have, a lot of publishers have responded to this very proactively, and these are some of the publishers that we've worked with. And really, it's been looking at, as Vivian was saying, the chapter, and the chapter as a distinct piece of content that can be discoverable in and of itself, right? And being able to take those chapters and aggregate them amongst journal content and other pieces of content, and drawing people into the book at the chapter level. So in terms of developing abstracts and keywords, some publishers have taken different approaches to this. For instance, some publishers have looked at the introduction or the first couple of pages of a particular chapter and said, well, that'll make a good abstract. Why don't I just do that? And it's fairly quick and easy to do and doesn't cost a lot of money. That has worked to some extent. Other publishers have looked at table of contents and lists of summaries or sections and presented those as abstracts. That's had some good results for some publishers. But if we go to the next slide, you know, it's been pretty evident, and the discovery gods have spoken on this and said that, you know, that really doesn't work, that we need something, an abstract that's more like a journal article, that really gives a very clear and comprehensive representation of the whole. So something that is really curated, right? So if we go to the next slide, one of the ideas that came from authors, from publishers to say, well, let's push this out to authors. Authors know the content that they've written. They're experts in the field. So let's ask our authors to do this. And I think there's been some mixed results, as Vivian was saying. It's been a little bit of a challenge to get authors to even do this, number one. But I think what's more important is that the abstracts that come back from authors sometimes are not very SEO friendly, right? Machine readability is a very important consideration for any kind of an abstract. And the way machines work is to read things like cue phrases and to learn you know, certain elements within the content that trigger it to pay attention to the following elements, right? So can authors really provide an abstract that can be optimized for discovery? So I think the next slide I give a little bit of an example. And I'm sorry for all these things. This was supposed to be animated, but we converted it to PDF, Melisand's fault. But if you can see shading, I don't, but that one box in the middle there is a author abstract for the same piece of content there, right? So I have an author abstract and an SME curated abstract, right? The author abstract tends to be free-flowing. There's some subjective material in it. The content is unstructured. And if you're able to read some of the keywords on the left there for the SME curated abstract, you'll find some of those keywords, and there's not a lot of them, so it's a very specific chapter, are not represented in the author's summary. But that summary is being machine read, and somebody mentioned yesterday in a session that, you know, one of their clients' content was being hit 5 times a second by users, but 45 times a second by bots and readers coming in, reading the content, right? So if you're not editing the content for machine readability and optimizing it, you know, you're really going to come up short on the machine reading level, which is really, really important, okay? So you'll see in the SME curated abstract, there are cue phrases that come up. This chapter provides an overview of, well, the machine wants to grab that. The machine wants to grab other things like other topics in this chapter include blah, blah, blah. So the machine knows what to read and what to emphasize next. I think what's most important about this is that if you look at the last sentence of the curated abstract, you'll see there are a list right there of about 5 additional topics that are really specific. So if you're looking to connect your content and to create, valuable connections from one chapter to another in a machine that's going to recommend content, all of these great jumping off points in those words are missed by the author version, right? So, next slide. This was pointed out in a recent Scholarly Kitchen article by Jill O'Neill, that this has been difficult trying to get authors to create abstracts, number one, and to create machine-readable, optimized abstracts, number two. Isn't there something that technology can possibly do to fix this, right? So on the next slide, we have created a service at Scope that's called Concise, right? That uses natural language processing and machine learning to generate these optimized abstracts, okay? What it really involves is a machine reading the entire document, right, and spitting out a draft abstract and a list of keywords that a subject matter expert in that area of discipline reviews and curates an optimized abstract. So I'll give you a little sense of what that looks like. So here you have the curation screen for the subject matter expert. So, the technology reads the document very quickly. You'll see toward the middle of the top there, the automated abstract. Below that is an HTML version of that automated abstract, and you'll see color-coded keywords and key phrases and concepts in that HTML view, right? And then below that is the keyword selection screen, and that's divided into locations of the keywords within the document. So where was that keyword in a title? Was that word in a subtitle? Was it within the full text of the document? And also the frequency of those words. So very quickly, the editor has a sense of what phrases, what terms to emphasize, makes sure that those keywords and those terms with the highest frequency get represented in the abstract that will be machine read, right? And then there's actually a scoring mechanism at the top, which gives the abstractor an indication of how SEO friendly the abstract is, what the readability score is. So is the abstract written very nicely, and is it not repetitive in any way? And there are a couple of other scores there in terms of the optimization of the abstract. But basically, once the edit is done, the subject matter expert can get a sense of whether they really nailed it or not. And if they haven't, they can go back to, there's a button there that goes back to the actual PDF, the original document, and they can go and look at the phrases, and they can see the context around those particular phrases. So it's a really great editing tool. So we'll go to the next slide. So when we partner with a publisher or an information provider, we ask them, how long would you like the abstract to be? How many keywords? Do you have a controlled vocabulary that we can leverage within the platform? So that plugs into the back of the platform and identifies controlled vocabulary terms in the content. Those are tagged and indexed as well. What kind of format do you need the deliverable in terms of a DTD or a particular schema? Next slide. And the workflow is fairly simple. So what we do is we work with a client's typesetters, and the typesetter gets the source file from the client, creates their first draft, so to speak, and then loads that onto our FTP site in a variety of formats. We're able to take that, ingest it in the engine in whatever format the typesetter sends it to us. We pump it through the engine, put it back on the FTP site. The typesetter downloads the metadata from that and incorporates it right in the source file, right? For back files, we work directly with clients a lot of the time. They just send us their XML or PDF files, and we're able to ingest both types into the engine. So if you're looking to create really good metadata and keywords and abstracts for back content, this is a very efficient way and cost-effective way of doing this. And scalable, so the turnaround is very quick. So there's just an example of what the abstract and the keywords look like in the XML. So it fits very nicely right into the file.
Okay.
You can skip this. So some best practices to keep in mind, whether you use a system that, like we do, or just in general looking to maybe curate your own abstracts. You know, try to use the wording direct from the content. Use a consistent domain-specific terminology, like a controlled vocabulary. You know, make sure the content is coherent. Make sure that, you know, the abstracts cover they're comprehensive and cover all the key topics in the text. And I think I have one or two more slides, and then we can complete this. Okay, so this is just a rendering of what this looks like. A very neat, you know, the PDF comes in, and we spit this metadata back to the client. And just here, some of the results. Here was a posting in against the grain where Taylor and Francis saw 14 times more likely usage with titles that have chapter-level metadata. So the chapter is really the economy these days. And then one more slide I think we have where JSTOR did a pilot, and using you know, chapters and journal content together in the same platform, aggregating those into search results really drove demand-driven acquisition quite well. So this seems to be working, and I guess the message is descriptive metadata, very high quality, is really going to produce some good results for you. Thank you.
Good. Great. Thanks, Rich.
Thank you.